Well, the capture of Thabo Bester and his partner in Tanzania over this weekend marks the end of the pair's run from the law. It's now expected the two will be deported back to South Africa in the next few days. And of course, Bester may have gotten away with it all were it not for the dogged investigation of the Ground Up news organisation. I'm joined now by Marecia Damons of Ground Up, part of the team that broke that story. Marecia, thank you so much for joining us. I would imagine it must have been a great sense of satisfaction when you heard the news over the weekend that Bester had been apprehended.
Yes, it was definitely, I think, a sigh of relief that he had finally been apprehended. I think it came rather sooner than we had expected, just given the fact that it had taken almost a year for the authorities to start acting on the fact that he had escaped. I mean, only in March did we get a confirmation that Thabo Bester had actually escaped, despite all the compelling evidence that Ground Up had been publishing prior to that. So it was definitely some form of a relief that he had finally been apprehended over the weekend.
We know that G4S, the company, was quite clinging to the story that Bester had in fact perished in his cell. Have they issued any press release at all since his arrest and absolute confirmation that he is very much still alive?
So the last that we had received from G4S was that they were still busy conducting their own investigation and that they wanted to come to their own conclusions. So as far as we know, G4S hasn't issued any statement giving any direct confirmation that the person who died was in fact Thabo Bester. So as far as we know, they're still busy with their investigations and would like to come to their own conclusions on the circumstances surrounding the fire that had broken out in Thabo Bester's cell.
And then today in court, of course, we saw former G4S employee Sinoe Matswara and then the father of Dr. Nandipha, Zolile Sekeleni. Were you surprised to see Dr. Nandipha's dad facing these charges?
It definitely came as a surprise that her father was also facing charges for his alleged involvement in Thabo Bester's escape. I think as far as the G4S employee, Mr. Sinoe Matswara, is involved, his name had come up quite a few times in quite a couple of media reports that came out this year in light of the escape. But it was definitely, I think, a shock that Dr. Nandipha Magadumana's dad is now also being implicated in murder charges, defeating the ends of justice, as well as aiding Thabo Bester in his escape. So that was definitely somewhat of a surprise.
Yeah, and to sort of put a murder charge to him when, you know, we don't even know if this person was murdered by the people clearly involved in this network. I mean, as I said earlier, he could have been found from a mortuary, a murdered person kept in a mortuary. Do you have any clues at this stage as to who that body in the cell belonged to?
No, so at this stage, it still remains unconfirmed who that person was who had died and whose body was implanted effectively in the cell. There are obviously suspicions at this stage, given that Dr. Nandipha Magadumana's father, that his name has now been thrown into the hat and that he's been hit with a murder charge. There are allegations going around that the individual who he's been linked to allegedly murdering might have been the same person whose body was found in the cell. But at this stage, there's no conclusive evidence to tie the two together. But at this point in time, it still remains unclear who the person was whose body they found in that cell.
Ground Up has been digging into the story for a long time. We've seen these two arrests. We know that Sinoe was one of the people who was fired after an investigation at the prison. Have you got a sense at Ground Up of just how big this network might be, how many people potentially could be implicated to get him out of prison?
Yes, so obviously, we don't have an exact number of the people who were involved in this, but given the fact that the Mangaung Correctional Facility is a maximum security prison with cameras everywhere and only certain people have access to certain things, it's very clear that Thabo Bester had received extensive amount of help from the prison personnel. And I think this court case is just the beginning of figuring out just how many people are being implicated. But my guess is that it is quite a number of individuals.
And then finally, just focusing on Dr. Nandipha, I would imagine that you've taken quite a look at the history of their connection and their relationship. My understanding is that they met at university and have stayed in touch. But in assessing why a woman would strike up a relationship or continue a very close connection with someone convicted of rape and of murder, do you have a sense of her motivations and her mindset? I mean, do you have an idea of whether she's simply in his thrall because he is a well-known scam artist, or do you think that she's perhaps exactly aware of what she's doing?
So the nature and the history of their relationship still remains somewhat of a mystery. What we do know from the affidavits that Dr. Nandipha had filed when she tried to claim the body back that had burnt in the cell. What we do know is that, as you said, she claimed that they had met in university, but according to previous court papers, Thabo Bester said that he had actually dropped out of school in grade 5. So there are just some inconsistencies regarding where and how they might have met. But just based on individuals who have interacted with him, we understand Thabo Bester to be somewhat of a persuasive individual, perhaps a very charming individual, and it wouldn't be surprising if that might have been the reason why she decided to get involved with him. But just at this point, I think just the nature of their relationship and why she decided to get involved with a convicted rapist and murderer still remains such a mystery.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us some of your insights and also for the great work that you and the team at Ground Up have been doing, bringing this to the national attention. Thank you for your time there. That, of course, is Marecia Damons. She's of Ground Up, and that, of course, is the news organisation that first broke the story of the Facebook rapist's escape from prison.